Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Leadership. With me today from his home in Holland is Ira Morris. Ira is a leadership advisor, executive coach, team facilitator and organizational development consultant. And in a previous conversation on Let's Talk Leadership, he spoke with Ian Sturgis about coaching with horses. Today, he will talk about leading in uncertain times. Ira, welcome back.
Brit, good to see you. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, nice to be back with you here.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure. So, leading in uncertain times. I think we can both agree that of all the uncertain times we've been through, this is certainly a new extreme. And yes. What are we noticing around us as not just as coaches, but also as simply people, colleagues, friends, husbands, wives? Is that what I'm noticing is there's this mix of despair. You can call it, I think, despair and anxiety and concern about jobs, about income, about loved ones, about elderly parents, all of that stuff that's going on, and it's really quite intimidating. And on the other hand, a sense of hope and a sense of reinvention and a sense of, my goodness, things are possible now. Yes. I've met people who have started growing their own vegetables, who have made a home office and realized that they actually love combining looking after their children and working. Of course, you have to have the luxury of having the space to do so, and you have to have the luxury of not having been fired or furloughed. But there are grains of hope as well. Yes. How do you? What are you noticing?
I agree with you, Britt. I think it's sort of a tale of two cities in some ways. So for a lot of people, the starting point is survival. So in terms of health, either themselves or own health, or health of friends and family and people around them, and also in terms of health of business and income. And a lot of people are really finding it very difficult now. There's unprecedented levels of financial insecurity. People are worried about their jobs. There's been lots of redundancies, et cetera, et cetera. So I think on that issue itself, a lot of people are having it very difficult. And as you say, I think on the other hand, a lot of people are seeing possibility. So, in terms of working from home, using time more effectively, I think there's also a deeper sense of connectiveness. So, for example, you and I have been on Zoom calls where someone's children have kind of come into the room and, been welcomed by someone in our team and sort of having a quick conversation. That behavior is now much more accepted, makes us much more human compared to what was accepted in the past. Yeah. And also in terms of environmental possibilities, less air travel, less car traffic, there's cleaner air. So I think, on the one hand, we're fighting for survival, almost literally for some of us, and others, or maybe even the same person, we're also thinking about, possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say almost within the same person, because it's not as though that all of a sudden we are divided into the desperate and the hopeful. It's we seem to oscillate at sometimes, between what's scary and what is possible. So whether you're on the sort of more anxious side or on the more hopeful side, I guess the common thread is unpredictability, right? And at a huge level.
Indeed. Exactly.
How do you prepare for the unpredictable? How do you steel yourself or brace yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the starting point is to notice how you respond to the unpredictable. So in times of uncertainty, we often crave certainty. Often we crave what we don't have. And so, we might look to others to give us some sense of certainty, even though that's probably not well founded. There's no real basis for that certainty. And also physiologically, what we know through a lot of research is that our peripheral vision will physically narrow. And that's because that's been a helpful tactic in the past so that we can focus on a threat. Let's say a tiger that's approaching on the savannah. Luckily, we don't really have those kind of actual threats so much these days. But nonetheless, physiologically, if we perceive a threat or we perceive uncertainty, we will see less opportunity, we'll see less possibility. And there's a lot of research physiologically or neurologically, I should say, that talks about the functioning of the right brain and of the left brain in terms of their particular roles, so on and so forth. So
yes, yeah. please continue to talk. I'm just adjusting I'm
Sure.
switching microphones, but please continue to talk, because this right and left brain, I think what you're alluding to is that the detail versus the big picture, right?
Well, it's funny you mention it, because a lot of people have a particular understanding about the role of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And again, according to more recent research, that's not really well founded. So, for example, language processing takes place both in the left brain and the right brain. Emotional acuity also takes place in both hemispheres. So what they've discovered more recently is that the role of the left hemisphere is to utilize, so to grasp details, to grasp tools, to really look for certainty. And in contrast, the role of the right hemisphere is to scan the environment, to see possibility. And this is interesting not only for us as human beings, but also for mammals, including horses, which we talked about last time,
and
also birds. So a bird has to differentiate on the ground between, a pellet of food, let's say a seed or a grain, and on the other hand, a piece of gravel. So is it grain, is it gravel? And at the same time, whilst it's pecking on the ground to differentiate, to get to the grain rather than the gravel, it has to scan the environment to look out for predators. And that's the function of the right hemisphere. Now, of course, in everyday life, we don't notice the difference, right? We experience it as one. And I think one of the key points here is that in the current environment, our left hemisphere might come more into play. And again, remember, the left hemisphere is about utilization. It's about seeing the pieces rather than the whole. And it looks for certainty. It craves certainty. A consequence of that is that it tends to trust less. And in practical terms, we tend to have more in the way of surveillance, bureaucratic rules, to try and somehow give us confidence that there is certainty and there is safety. And I think that part of our conversation here really is to invite everyone to think about one's own preference. And am I using both hemispheres? Of course you are, but I mean, am I also looking at possibilities as I cope with the uncertainty? Or am I looking for the right answer? Am I looking for some solution to make this go away so we can go back to normal? I've heard people say, "Oh, I can't wait till this is over. I want to go back to normal." Well, that's not going to happen. So how might you see possibility whilst you might experience a lot of anxiety? That's the essence of what we're discussing.
Right. And as we know, in times of uncertainty and fear, we tend to narrow, we narrow the focus, the survival that you spoke about.
Yeah.
So there's almost this paradox, or maybe it's even a polarity within us, where we have to choose between what's important right now, where's the little grain right now that I need to eat, and make sure I don't eat a piece of stone.
Yeah.
Where's the bigger picture? Where are we headed? And what's in store for us and for me and my loved ones and the rest of the planet? Because if we've learned anything, it is that we are so interconnected.
Yes, and exactly. I think we're incredibly interconnected. We're very globalized, and the tendency, a natural human tendency, to respond to that, given the uncertainty, is to create more rules, more procedures. And we find that in the workplace as well, right? We place a lot of value on action, being busy, doing things, because it gives us some degree of comfort, some degree of certainty. And that's what's valued in the workplace. And that needs to continue. I'm not suggesting we abandon one way of working for the other. It's that reconciliation between, am I grasping the detail? I mean, literally, and am I seeing the bigger picture? And as people listen to our conversation, I'd like people to think about, where's my natural preference? Some of it might be personality related. Some of it might be related to the environment. Of course, you need to do both. And as we said at the beginning of the conversation, the context of uncertainty will exacerbate our tendency to use left hemisphere, which is about seeing the pieces, control, looking for certainty, looking for rational explanations, and listening less to possibility and to our intuition. So hence this conversation about leading in uncertainty. We have these tendencies anyway. I think with the current situation, these tendencies might be exacerbated to some extent.
Yeah, they might be. And we know, of course, from all sorts of models of personality and natural preferences.
Yeah.
The one between detail and bigger picture is a classic one in the Myers-Briggs type indicator, for example.
Yeah.
Would you also invite people to sort of explore if they know? First of all, how can you know what your preference is? Is there any sort of tips that you can help people with?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to attend to something, to attend to what's going on. Now, I think a lot of us who do this type of work, we come across, I think maybe sometimes our own belief and belief in others that attention is a passive activity. It sounds quite boring, right? What are you talking about attention? Of course, I attend. But the first thing I encourage people to at least consider is, what is it I'm attending to? What am I noticing? So am I noticing that level of anxiety? Of course, people will feel it. Question might be, how much am I actually attending to it and recognizing it? And perhaps just as important as a next step, am I staying with it? Or is it so unbearable? And recognizing for a lot of people, it really will be unbearable given their circumstances. But am I able to tolerate that uncertainty for a period of time? Because it's through the sort of bathing, if I can use that word, bathing in uncertainty, that you'll find possibility. Yet our natural tendency is to make it go away because it's very painful. So first step is to notice. And what are you noticing? What are you how wide is your vision? One might ask, how wide is your world? I asked my daughter the question and she said, Papa, did you mean like my inner world or do you mean my physical world? I said, well, it's really more your inner world. And so how big is your world? Are you noticing signals coming from within? So we live in a very rational world, lots of appreciation for evidence. So my question would be, are you noticing signals that are trying to make themselves heard? You and I have worked with people and teams where people are in meetings from 8 till 6, right? So meeting at 8, meeting at 9, no time to get a coffee, no time to have a break. It's very hard in those circumstances to create distance. And that's another practice and invite people to consider. How much distance do you create in your daily life? And I don't mean distance from people, because I think people are much more connecting, wanting to connect more. It's more distance in terms of distance from your day-to-day activities. So there's more recent research that shows the value of being unfocused. Again, I don't want people to feel that, I've been very focused, very successful. Are you saying I need to be unfocused? The question is, are you building in time into your schedule to doodle, to have unfocused time, so that signals from your right hemisphere can come to your sense of perception, to your sense of experience. Yeah. If you're very busy, that will not be the case. So I think creating some distance is a good practice.
It's good practice, and it's I assume crucial for innovation as well.
Indeed, exactly. I once worked with a leadership team that said we want to be more innovative. So again, we looked at their schedules for last week, looked at schedules for next week. So where's your space in your agenda? And it's that combination of space and, in some ways, I guess, tuning into the possibility that this crisis affords. Now, that might sound quite, insensitive to some people who are really struggling for survival. You're talking about me looking for possibility, but oftentimes the greatest inventions come when there's disruption, when there's unprecedented times and unprecedented circumstances. So the question is, are you balancing that ability to focus so you survive and get things done, but also creating time so you can generate ideas and respond to the possibilities that might present themselves if you were to listen to signals coming from deep within?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I am just as you. I know at least a handful of, I would say, more senior leaders in leadership, people in leadership roles, who might think that sounds a little bit kind of touchy-feely, fluffy, which you and I know it isn't. But I'm reminded when I listen to you about the curiosity and the distance with which a child can play, being totally focused at the same time and open to all sorts of possibilities.
Yes.
So making a big leap to the younger generation that we would so much like to support in their venture of this uncertain future. Would you say that possibly, and thinking about your daughter and her excellent question, would you invite the generation below us to keep some of that curiosity and that playfulness in order to help them navigate and to be less focused on filling your agenda to the brim with important meetings? Yes,
that's a wonderful question. I really love it. I think yes would be the short answer to your question. I think I think it's, firstly, I can acknowledge how difficult it must be for a lot of younger people at the moment who are maybe leaving university, starting their career, wondering how they're going to, get a first foot on the career ladder. So I acknowledge it must be very difficult for that group as well. I think, yes, I think it's for all of us to have that sense of curiosity. And I like your word playfulness. So the right hemisphere likes to play. It likes things that are animate as opposed to things that are inanimate. They like the interconnectedness of things. So what's interesting there is trying to maintain a sense of curiosity, especially when you're under pressure. That's point one. The other point I would suggest is, for all of us, it's sort of scanning the environment to look for something that is an anomaly, and I like the word anomaly. So we all have a mental model of the world. As some would say, sometimes our mental model is even better than reality because it helps us simplify and function. Simplify reality so that we can function. The challenge then for all of us is when we have something that comes across our horizon, be it someone's behavior, be it a situation that doesn't fit our mental model. One question is, how do you respond to that? What are you noticing? So the opportunity there is to take the anomaly, and it's an anomaly because it doesn't fit our model of the world. And we all have our unique model of the world that sometimes we find difficult to articulate because it's so inherent to us. We can't always see it. So I'll give an example. I mean, at the start of the crisis, just to kind of sort of make it very concrete. So at the beginning of March, just at the early days of the crisis, at least here in Northern Europe, with my colleagues, we turned up in Cambridge to run a 2-day trainer workshop. We arrived on the Wednesday evening. The workshop was scheduled Thursday, Friday. We were told Wednesday evening, sorry guys, you're not allowed onto the premises. What was going to be a 2-day face-to-face workshop now needs to be a virtual workshop. Off you go and prepare for it. So my first reaction as an anomaly was, no, sorry, you can't do it. Maybe you've got time to catch the flight home and, that'll be the end of it. And so something that didn't fit my model of the world, like how do you do a trainer virtually, then became part of my model of the world. So I was able to recognize it didn't fit. And then with my colleagues, we're able to create a solution that actually works, reasonably well. Yeah. So we all have that experience. And I think, remember, in times of uncertainty, our tendency will be to narrow our focus. Yeah. Right. So yes or no. No, it can't be done. So it's really how do we integrate the anomaly? So it could be someone's behaving in a way that's unexpected or unpredicted. How do we make sense of that? And are we aware of even making sense of it? And can we expand our model? It goes back to that question earlier, which is how big is your world? The more you can review, and this is the beauty of the right hemisphere's function, is to understand. So the more we can expand our understanding, the more we'll be able to utilize the world. So you need both. It's that balance, yin and yang, let's say male, female almost, not implying one hemisphere is male, the other is female, nothing like that. But it's both and rather than either or.
Yes, it's both and. That's really good. Yes. So we've had your tip on dedicating time for sort of unfocused activity and distance, seeing the bigger picture and making space for that in your daily life. Yep. Another concrete one, I think, coming from you is the curiosity. Stay curious and be open to what's happening. And I think curiosity is a much better mindset than fear. Curiosity can replace fear. I think that these were the words of Marie Curie in the beginning of the 20th century, who said, "Nothing is to be feared; it is only to be understood."
Lovely.
And when you are curious, you're on your way to understanding. Yes. Making sense, right?
That's right.
Is there any other concrete thing that people can take away? We have the anomaly, of course. So be aware of a situation that you didn't expect, or something occurring, or even a person, or whatever, and try to adapt to that, again, possibly with a sense of curiosity.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Then, is there anything else that we can invite people to think about?
Yeah, I think just to add to your point, it's just even noticing when there's an anomaly.
Yeah.
So it's actually saying, oh, there it is. So it's kind of looking above oneself and saying, oh, this person behaved in a way that I didn't expect, or I'm responding in a way that I didn't expect, or I'm confronted with a situation that I had not prepared for. How do I respond to that? Is it interesting that this is my reaction? So again, this is the idea that attention is an active process, whereas lots of us think it's kind of passive. So distance, incorporating anomalies, and linked to that point really is recognizing a sense of discomfort. So as a leadership practice, for us as individuals, and if we're leading teams, being aware of a sense of discomfort and trying to stay with that, not for any other reason apart from trying to learn, what does that tell me about myself and my team if there is that kind of discomfort. The other thing I would say, and that some of it is somatic, and it's related to your body. Where am I feeling that discomfort? And again, recognizing that a lot of times we want that feeling to go away because it's by definition not comfortable.
No.
The only thing I would add to that is really about that balance between seeing the rational, the data, the evidence, and tuning into your own intuition. In business, and maybe sometimes in everyday life, we don't always value intuition. So what does that mean? That means being alert to signals that are faint in who you are. So what signals trying to come through to you? And when we're busy, we can squash it and ignore it because we go to our next meeting. But trying to attend to faint signals, and even being conscious of what a faint signal might even mean in practice.
So sometimes called a gut feeling, maybe?
Kind of a gut feeling. Yeah, it's a gut feeling. It's an intuition as an additional source of data. Yeah, so even what we're talking about now is sort of left hemisphere thinking.
Yeah.
So it's a framework, by definition it's a model which is only partly explaining our experience, but it's that kind of gut feeling as an additional source of data. And others talk about emotions, for example, being a source of data rather than a source of direction. Is it interesting? I'm feeling anxious about this. Doesn't mean then I need to make it go away, or I need to respond in a particular manner. It's additional data that complements the data we have in our mind about, let's say verifiable information or rational information. And it goes back to this idea of also like childlike behavior or childlike playfulness, more accurately. So, intuition, intuition coming from the right hemisphere is pre-language. So you'll have a reaction to something, and then a second or two later, you'll make sense of it with your concepts and with your language. So what I'm suggesting is for us as part of our practice to attune to what we notice before we can articulate what it is. So it sounds philosophical, and part of it is enhancing our own practice as leaders. But I feel that especially now, this is so important because of infighting between groups, or, in groups and out groups, them and us. We talked about globalization, projection onto others about their behavior, how they're doing it wrong. And whilst there might be some good evidence for that, what I'm suggesting is trying to understand as well as, making sense of things is a good balance, and to consider. We will, naturally gravitate more towards one or the other. And you mentioned as well the quote from Marie Curie, which is wonderful. And again, Marie Curie was ahead of her time in terms of this neuroscience. The same with Albert Einstein. He talks about the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. And so the premise these days, I think, is that the rational mind is actually no longer the faithful servant, but the master. It's in charge.
Yes.
We're losing the intuition, partly because of culture, partly because of our life at work, all for understandable reasons. And so I think our conversation here is intended to help people think about that balance between the rational mind and the intuitive mind.
And the intuitive. And I really like that you pull poor Albert Einstein into the conversation, who in most people's minds would be, a prototype of an extremely rational
That's true. Yes.
Down to earth, fact-based,
Yes.
hardcore scientist. And
Exactly.
yet he had a very, very intuitive sense of how important it is not always to be cerebral.
Yes.
About yourself and about the natural world. Yeah, fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Well, it's been fascinating to talk to you, and we could just go on, have another coffee and continue, but the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
So in closing, Ira, you've mentioned a lot of things. Is there anything else that you would invite, especially young leaders who are just starting out?
Yeah.
To be mindful of, except that you've now reassured them in telling them that they are hopefully still closer to that open mind of the child, and I mean that in a most respectful and positive way of young children.
Yeah, I think so. I think it goes back to the points we made earlier in terms of, at a very practical level, looking at your schedule. Yeah. So how much space are you creating? How much space did you create last week? And when you look at your schedule next week, how much space have you created? And I think, that's a very practical point. And the other point is, when something comes in unexpected, it doesn't fit your frame of the world, how do you respond to it? Do you reject it? Do you try and incorporate it? So I just invite people to think, maybe not all the time, because that would stop us from functioning, but maybe think about a recent event, in terms of someone's behavior, in terms of, let's say, your own reaction to a new situation. How did you respond to that anomaly, that thing that didn't really fit your model? How did you respond? Is your model now bigger because your world is getting bigger, or is it something that you rejected? It doesn't mean you need to incorporate all the anomalies, but it's thinking about, in my practice, how do I incorporate that new information that doesn't fit with my model of the world?
Pay attention to your attention.
There you go. Exactly. Perfect.
Right. Well, Ira, many, many, many thanks for this second conversation on Let's Talk Leadership, and all the best for a good summer. And I hope to see you again soon.
Indeed. Thanks, Brit. Good to see you as well. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay.